The last time my family acknowledged my existence, it was on a wire transfer form demanding $163,000. It was not a birthday card or a phone call, but a demand for my life savings. After 8 years of absolute silence, I was suddenly the only thing standing between them and financial ruin. By the time they realized I had not signed that paper, I did not even have their last name anymore. I am Natalie Simmons, or at least, that is the name on my driver's license now. It is the name on the lease of my apartment here in Chicago, the name on my health insurance, and the name on the ID badge I swipe every morning to get into the elevator at the Northbridge Ledger Group. It is a good name. It is a clean name. It feels sturdy, like a brick wall I built myself, one day at a time, to keep the wind out. But it is not the name I was born with. That name belongs to a girl who spent the last decade waiting for a phone call that never came. I remember the exact moment I decided to kill that girl off. It happened on a Tuesday evening in November. I was sitting at my kitchen island, the blue light of my laptop reflecting off a glass of cheap Pinot Grigio. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet you pay a premium for in a city that usually sounds like sirens and construction. I was winding down, scrolling through junk mail, deleting promotional offers for credit cards I did not need, and flyers for furniture sales I did not care about. And then I saw it. It was an email from a generic Gmail address. I did not recognize immediately, but the subject line made my stomach drop through the floor and settle somewhere near the basement parking garage. Urgent Family Support Agreement. Action required. My hands actually hovered over the keyboard for a full minute. My heart rate, which I usually keep as steady as a metronome, spiked. For 8 years. My inbox had been a ghost town when it came to the people who shared my DNA. No birthday cards, no Christmas newsletters, no notifications that a cousin was getting married or an aunt had passed away. Just absolute, vacuum-sealed silence. I clicked open. There was no text in the body of the email. No hello, Natalie. No, long time no see. No, how have you been? There was just a single PDF attachment titled Mercer Family Participation Agreement V4 PDF. I downloaded it, I opened it, and I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. It was a legal document. It looked professional, drafted on letterhead I had never seen before, complete with sections for clauses, liability, and termination. But my eyes went straight to the bottom of page 3, to the line item highlighted in yellow. It was a request for a wire transfer. The amount was not a round number. It was not a casual request for a few $100s to fix a flat tire or pay a medical bill. The amount listed was $163,412.88. I sat back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. I knew that number. I knew it intimately. I knew it down to the 88 cents. That was the exact balance of my primary savings account and my diversified investment portfolio combined. It was every single penny I had managed to scrape together since I walked out of my father's house with a backpack and a student loan debt that felt like an anvil. It was my forget you money. It was my safety net. It was the only thing that allowed me to sleep at night. They did not just want money, they wanted all of it. They wanted to zero me out. I scrolled down to the signature line. It was already pre-filled. My birth name was typed out in bold, capital letters, with a blank space above it just waiting for my digital signature. Below that, in the section for the beneficiary, were the routing details for a corporate account belonging to Mercer Harbor Developments, a company I would later learn was my father's latest attempt to play real estate tycoon. I want you to really understand the level of audacity here. The last time my family said my name, it was not to tell me they loved me. It was not to ask if I was happy. It was on a wire transfer form. 8 years of silence. 2,920 days of acting like I had fallen off the face of the earth. And suddenly I was the only thing standing between them and losing everything. They did not even have the decency to call and lie to me first. They just sent an invoice. I am a senior forensic accountant. That is what I do for a living. I work for Northbridge Ledger Group, one of the most viciously efficient financial consulting firms in the Midwest. Companies hire us when the numbers do not add up. They hire me when they suspect their CFO is skimming off the top, or when a subsidiary is bleeding cash into a shell company in the Caymans. I spend 60 hours a week staring at spreadsheets, hunting for anomalies. I look for the patterns that people try to hide. I look for the gap between what people say and what the math proves. I do not deal in feelings. I deal in receipts. And because of my job, I have developed a habit that some people might call obsessive, but I call necessary. I count everything. I do not just count money, I count interactions. I count effort. When I saw that number $163,000, I did not cry. I did not panic. I opened a new tab on my browser and pulled up a spreadsheet I have kept hidden in a password-protected folder for nearly a decade. It is titled Mercer Contact Log XLSX. I looked at the data I had compiled over the last 8 years. Column A, outgoing calls. Total count 312. Column B, outgoing texts. Total count 456. Column C. Gifts, sent birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. Total count 42. Column D. Financial support provided school fees for my brother. Emergency repairs for my stepmother. Total sum $22,400. Then I looked at the columns for responses. Incoming calls, 0. Incoming texts, 7. Mostly asking where the wire transfer was. Return gifts, 0. Thank you. Notes, 0. How are you? Inquiries. 0. The math was undeniable. The ledger was unbalanced. In the business world, if a partner took $22,000 of your capital, ignored 300 of your calls, and then sent you a bill for $163,000, you would not call them family. You would call the FBI. You would call a lawyer. You would prosecute them for fraud and embezzlement. But because it is family, society expects us to operate on a different currency. We are supposed to trade in guilt. We are supposed to accept emotional bankruptcy as long as it comes from people who share our last name. We are supposed to look at a contract that demands our entire future and sign it because blood is thicker than water. Well, I have run the numbers. And let me tell you, blood is expensive. Blood has a terrible return on investment. I looked at that PDF again. The family support agreement. The language was manipulative genius. It framed the transfer not as a loan, but as a contribution to the family legacy. It stated that by signing, I was affirming my commitment to the unity and prosperity of the Mercer household. It explicitly waived my right to ask for the money back. It waived my right to audit how the funds were used. It was a donation to a black hole. And the timing, it was surgical. I check my credit report weekly, another hazard of the trade. I knew my credit score was pristine. I knew my assets were liquid. Someone, likely my father, had done his homework. He knew exactly how much I was worth. He had probably spent weeks calculating the maximum amount he could extract from me without triggering a federal investigation, settling on the exact figure that would drain me dry but keep his sinking ship afloat for another 6 months. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted sour. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest with me. I want you to go down to the comments section right now and tell me what you would do. Imagine you are me. Imagine you are sitting in a quiet apartment you paid for with your own sweat and tears. Imagine you have spent 8 years screaming into the void, trying to get your father to pick up the phone, trying to get your stepmother to acknowledge you exist, trying to get your little brother to see you as a sister, and not just an ATM. Imagine you have finally stopped screaming. You have finally found peace in the silence. And then, out of the blue, the void screams back. But it does not say, I miss you. It says, pay up. If your family ignored you for 8 years, erased you from their lives, pretended you were dead to their friends and neighbors, and then showed up on a Tuesday night asking for your life savings, what would you do? Would you sign the paper? Would you call them, weeping, happy that they finally reached out? Would you try to buy their love one last time? Because I will tell you what I did not do. I did not sign the line above my birth name. In fact, looking at that name on the screen, Natalie Mercer, I felt a strange sense of detachment. It looked like a typo. It looked like a stranger's name. That girl, Natalie Mercer. She was a doormat. She was a desperate, lonely kid who thought that if she just wrote a big enough check, Daddy would finally be proud. She was the girl who sent $22,000 into a hole and waited for an echo. I am not Natalie Mercer anymore. I am the senior forensic accountant at Northbridge Ledger Group. I destroy fraudulent schemes for a living. I track down hidden assets. I expose liars who hide behind cooked books and emotional manipulation. And when I looked at that contract, I did not see a family crisis. I saw a poorly constructed Ponzi scheme trying to acquire a new investor. I realized something sitting there in the dark. My family did not forget me. You do not ask a stranger for $163,000. You only ask that of someone you think you own. They had not forgotten me. They had just put me in storage. I was an asset they had depreciated on their mental balance sheet, kept in reserve for a rainy day. Well, it was pouring rain now, and they had come to collect. But they made a critical error in their calculations. They assumed the woman reading the email was the same girl who left home 8 years ago. They assumed I was still operating on the old software of guilt and obligation. They did not realize that 8 years of silence changes a person. It hardens you. It turns your heart into something resembling a calculator cold, logical, and incapable of accepting a bad deal. I closed the laptop. I did not reply, not yet. Before I hit send on the response that would burn the bridge they were trying to cross, before I show you the contract they tried to trap me with and the absolute chaos I unleashed in response, I need to take you back. You need to understand the context. You need to see the data points that led to this conclusion. I need to take you back to the beginning. To the first time I realized I wasn't a daughter to them. I was just a walking emergency fund. I need to take you back to the years when I was still trying to buy a seat at a table where I was never actually welcome. Because to understand why I changed my name and never went back, you have to understand exactly how much it cost me to stay. My mother died when I was 12 years old. It happened fast. A sudden aneurysm that turned a Tuesday morning breakfast into a funeral arrangement by Friday. Her passing was the line in the sand that divided my life into two distinct eras. There was the era of warmth, of hot cocoa on snowy mornings and handmade Halloween costumes, and then there was the era that came after, the era of cold surfaces and polite distances. Graham Mercer, my father, mourned for exactly 14 months. I remember the timeline because I counted the days on a calendar in my bedroom, marking each one off with a black Sharpie, wondering when the house would stop feeling so empty. It never did. Instead, the house just got crowded. He married Veronica exactly 2 years after the funeral. Veronica was beautiful in a sharp, angular way, like a diamond that could cut glass. To the neighbors, to the church congregation, and to my father's business associates, she was the picture of maternal grace. She knew exactly when to tilt her head in sympathy and when to laugh at a joke that wasn't funny. But the moment the front door clicked shut and the guests were gone, her face would relax into a mask of utter indifference. She did not hate me. Hate requires energy. She simply treated me like a piece of furniture that came with the house, an outdated lamp she could not throw away but refused to turn on. Then came Landon. My half-brother arrived 3 years later, and with his birth, the realignment of the Mercer solar system was complete. Landon was the sun. My father and Veronica were the planets orbiting him, basking in his gravity. I was demoted to the status of a stray asteroid, drifting further and further into the dark, cold reaches of space. I became the family historian. Not because I wanted to preserve memories, but because holding the camera gave me something to do with my hands when nobody spoke to me. If you look at the Mercer family albums from those years, you will notice a pattern. There are hundreds of photos of Landon blowing out candles, Landon catching his first fish, Landon building a sandcastle in the Hamptons. My father is in the frame, beaming. Veronica is there, glowing. I am not in the pictures. I was the one taking them. I learned to be invisible. It was safer that way. If I was invisible, Veronica could not critique my posture or my choice of clothing. If I was invisible, My father could not look right through me, which hurt more than if he had yelled. I threw myself into books. I discovered that I had a knack for patterns, for logic, for things that made sense in a way people did not. Numbers did not have moods. Equations did not play favorites. If you balanced the equation, it stayed balanced. It was reliable. By the time I was 18, I had taught myself that reliability was the only thing that mattered. I applied to 7 universities. I got into all of them. When the acceptance letters came, I laid them out on the kitchen table, hoping for a "good job, Natalie," or a "we are proud of you." My father glanced at the spread while pouring himself a scotch. He told me that was nice, but they were saving for a new boat, so I would need to figure it out. So I did. I figured it out. I secured 2 academic scholarships and a Pell Grant. I worked 20 hours a week at a campus coffee shop during my freshman year, and 30 hours a week as a library archivist by my junior year. I ate instant noodles and skipped social events to pick up extra shifts. I graduated with honors, debt-free, with a degree in accounting and a minor in criminal justice. The irony, sharp as a knife, came during a dinner my father hosted for his golf buddies the summer after my graduation. I was there essentially to help clear the plates. I heard him booming from the head of the table, gesturing with a cigar. He told them that his daughter had just graduated top of her class. He said they were so proud. He said, and I quote, "We spared no expense for her education. We paid for everything so she could focus on her future." I froze, holding a stack of dirty dessert plates. The lie was so bold, so casual. He was wearing my hard work like a medal on his own chest. I wanted to smash the plates. I wanted to scream that he had not paid a dime, that the only thing he had contributed to my education was the silence that drove me to study in the library until midnight, just to avoid coming home. But I did not scream. I walked into the kitchen, scraped the plates into the trash, and promised myself I would get out. And I did. 2 weeks later, I landed the interview at Northbridge Ledger Group in Chicago. Northbridge was not just a firm, it was the firm. Getting an entry-level position there was harder than getting into Harvard Law. When the hiring manager called to offer me the job, telling me my starting salary a number that sounded like a fortune to a girl who budgeted for toothpaste, I felt lightheaded. I felt like I had finally crossed the finish line. I needed to tell someone. The habit of seeking approval is a hard one to break, even when you know the well is dry. I called my father. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I knew he was usually at his desk. The phone rang 4 times. Then it went to voicemail. "Hey, this is Graham. Leave a message." I took a deep breath. I said, "Hey, Dad. It's Natalie. I have huge news. I got the job in Chicago. The big one. I'm moving next month. Call me back when you get this." I waited. I checked my phone every 10 minutes. I checked it while I packed my boxes. I checked it while I signed the lease on my tiny studio apartment in the city. I checked it as I drove the moving truck onto the highway, watching the skyline of my hometown fade in the rearview mirror. He never called back. Life in Chicago was fast. The rhythm of the city suited me. I dove into the work at Northbridge. I learned how to track shell companies. I learned how to spot a falsified invoice from 50 paces. I became an auditor, a seeker of truth in a world of financial fiction. It was 3 months into my new life when the first major crack appeared in my denial. It was a Thursday in May. I was eating a salad at my desk, scrolling through Instagram on a burner account I kept just to see what the world was doing. I did not follow my family on my main account. It hurt too much, but curiosity is a poison you drink voluntarily. I searched for Landon's handle. I knew he was graduating from college that week. He had taken 5 years to finish a 4-year degree in communications, fully funded by the Bank of Dad. Of course, the first photo that popped up took the air right out of my lungs. It was a gallery post. The location tag said, "The Ritz-Carlton, Key West." The first photo was a wide shot of a ballroom. There were gold balloons spelling out, "Congrats, Landon." There were centerpieces made of white orchids. There was a DJ booth. There was a buffet that looked like it cost more than my entire year of rent. I swiped. There was Veronica, wearing a dress that likely cost $4,000, holding a glass of champagne. There was my father, his arm around Landon, laughing with his head thrown back. There were cousins I had not seen in years. There were neighbors. I swiped again. A video. The sound of cheering. My father holding a microphone, making a toast. "To my son," he said, his voice booming over the speakers. "The future of the Mercer name." I sat in my gray cubicle, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and stared at the screen. They were in Florida, the whole family, a massive celebration, a destination party, and I had not even received a text message. My mind, desperate to protect me, began to sprint through logical fallacies. Maybe the invitation got lost in the mail. I thought, I just moved. Mail forwarding is tricky. Maybe they thought I was too busy with the new job. Maybe they tried to call and I missed it. I knew it was not true. I knew my phone history. I knew my mailbox. But the pathetic, eager-to-please child inside me refused to die. She insisted that if I just acted the part of the good daughter, they would realize their mistake. If I played by the rules, they would let me back in the game. I opened my banking app. I had just received my quarterly bonus. It was not huge, but it was significant for me. I navigated to the Bill Pay section. I set up a new payee, Landon Mercer. I typed in the amount $400. In the memo line, I wrote, "Happy graduation, so proud of you, love, Natalie." I hit send, then I waited. I told myself that surely this would trigger a response. $400 was a generous gift. It was an olive branch wrapped in cash. Landon would see it. He would text me. He would say, "Oh my God, Nat, thank you. Sorry you weren't there. It was crazy." Day 1 passed. Nothing. Day 2 passed. Nothing. On the third day, I logged into my bank account. I clicked on the transaction history. Status deposited. The money was gone. It had been accepted, processed, and added to Landon's account. I checked my phone. No text, no call, no email. I checked my spam folder. Nothing. The silence was so loud it was deafening. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It was that they felt entitled to my generosity while simultaneously denying my existence. They would take the fruit, but they would not water the tree. That afternoon, I did not cry. Instead, I opened a blank Excel spreadsheet on my work computer. I saved the file as Mercer Contact Log, XLSX. I started typing. Row 1, column A, date, May 12th. Row 1, column B, action. Sent graduation gift, check 1 in 42. Row 1, column C, value, $400. Row 1, column D, response, none. Then I started working backward. I went through my phone logs. I went through my old emails. I went through my bank statements from college. December 25th. Sent gift basket to Dad and Veronica. Value, $85. Response, none. November 14th. Called Dad for his birthday. Duration, 0 minutes. Voicemail. Response, none. July 4th. Texted Landon. Happy 4th. Response, none. I spent 3 hours entering data. I chronicled every single attempt I had made to connect with them over the last 4 years. I quantified the rejection. I turned the vague ache in my chest into hard, cold data points. When I was finished, I sat back and looked at the screen. The response column was a sea of emptiness. It was a solid block of zeros, of none, of NA. The value column, however, had a sum at the bottom. Even back then, before the big numbers started piling up, I had spent over $2,000 trying to buy their attention. It was a sobering image. It looked like the audit of a failing company. It looked like a scam. I remember staring at the cursor blinking in that final, empty cell. I realized then that I wasn't just a daughter they had forgotten. I was a resource they were tapping into whenever it was convenient, and ignoring whenever it wasn't. That spreadsheet knew the truth about my family long before I was willing to admit it. It told a story of a one-way transaction, but even then, looking at the undeniable proof of their indifference, I couldn't bring myself to close the account. I just saved the file, locked it with a password, and waited. I didn't know it yet, but I had just started building the case file that would eventually save my life. By the time I hit my third anniversary at Northbridge Ledger Group, the dynamic of my life had shifted. I was no longer the broke student scraping by on ramen and hope. I was a senior associate. I had paid off 90% of my student loans. My credit score was in the high 700s. I had a savings account that was actually growing, not just fluctuating between double and single digits, and like sharks sensing a drop of blood in a vast ocean. My family sensed the liquidity, the silence that I had documented so carefully in my spreadsheet. That crushing quiet of the first few years suddenly broke, but it did not break with an apology. It did not break with a request to catch up. It broke with a notification on my phone screen that would set the tone for the next half-decade of my life. It was a text message from Veronica. I remember staring at it during a client meeting. My phone was face up on the mahogany conference table. The name Veronica flashed, and my heart did that stupid, hopeful gymnastic tumble it always did. I thought something terrible had happened. I thought someone was dead. I excused myself, went to the hallway, and opened the message. "Sweetheart, can you help family emergency? Please call." I called immediately. My hands were shaking. Veronica answered on the first ring. Her voice was breathless, pitched an octave higher than normal, the specific tone she used when she wanted to sound fragile. She told me that a massive storm had swept through their county the night before. She said the wind had sheared the shingles right off the roof of the main house. There was a leak in the master bedroom. Mold was a risk. The insurance company was stalling, claiming it was wear and tear rather than storm damage, and they wouldn't cut a check for weeks. "We need to fix it before winter really sets in." "Natalie," she said, "your father is so stressed. His blood pressure is through the roof. I don't know who else to ask. We just need a bridge loan, just until the insurance payout comes through." I asked how much. $9,000, she said. I paused. $9,000 was a lot of money. It was my entire emergency fund plus a chunk of my vacation savings. But then I heard my father in the background, coughing. I visualized the house I grew up in, water dripping onto the floorboards. I thought about the family participation agreement that didn't exist yet, but was being written in their minds. "I'll wire it today," I said. "Oh, thank God." Veronica breathed. "You're a lifesaver. Natalie, we won't forget this. As soon as State Farm pays us, you get it back." I felt good. I felt useful. I felt like a daughter. I walked back into that meeting with my head high, thinking that I had finally purchased my ticket back into the inner circle. I was the one who saved the roof. That had to count for something. I was an idiot. The reality check arrived exactly 2 months later. I was not friends with Veronica on Facebook. She had blocked me years ago for privacy reasons, but I was still friends with Jessica, a girl I went to high school with who still lived 3 streets over from my father's house. I was working late, auditing a logistics company's fuel expenses, when a message popped up from Jessica. "Hey Nat, saw this and thought of you. Didn't know your folks were doing so well." Attached was a screenshot of a Facebook post from Veronica's profile. The photo showed Veronica standing in the driveway. The sun was shining. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, leaning against the hood of a brand-new silver SUV. It was a luxury model, the kind with heated leather seats and a panoramic sunroof. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. Finally treated myself to the upgrade I deserve. Blessed new whip Mercer style." I zoomed in on the photo. I wasn't looking at the car. I was looking at the roof of the house in the background. The shingles looked old. There were no patches of new asphalt. There was no sign of a recent repair crew. It looked exactly the same as it had the day I left. I pulled up the manufacturer's website for the SUV. I looked at the financing options, the standard down payment for that specific model, with the trim package visible in the photo, was approximately $8,500. Add in taxes and fees, and you were looking at a cash-out-the-door price of almost exactly $9,000. I sat there in my office, the hum of the server room the only sound. The math was perfect. It was elegant. Assets. Natalie's $9,000, stated purpose emergency roof repair, actual used down payment on a luxury vehicle for the stepmother who hadn't wished me a happy birthday in 4 years. I didn't call her. I didn't scream. I did what I always do. I opened Mercer Contact Log, XLSX. I added a new column. I called it Discrepancies. Next to the entry for the $9,000 wire transfer, I pasted the link to the car dealership and the screenshot of Veronica's post. I highlighted the cell in red. That was the beginning of the ATM era. Once the seal was broken, the requests stopped being emergencies and started becoming opportunities. They realized that the account was open, and they intended to drain it. Landon surfaced 16 months after the roof incident. I hadn't heard his voice in over a year. No texts, no calls. He had graduated, allegedly, and was living in the guest house. When my phone rang, and I saw Landon on the caller ID, I knew exactly what it was, but I answered anyway. "Hey, sis," he said. No hello, no inquiry about my life, my job, or the fact that I was living alone in a city of 3 million people. "You're good with money, right? Like, that's your whole thing now." "I'm an accountant, Landon," I said. "So, yes. Awesome. Listen, I have this vision. It's a podcast studio. But not just a studio. It's like a media incubator. I have a buddy who knows a guy at Spotify. We just need the gear, mics, soundproofing, a mixing board. It's going to blow up. Nat, I promise. I just need seed capital." "How much?" I asked. My voice was flat. 6,000, he said. "To do it right." I looked at my spreadsheet. I looked at the red cell with the SUV. I knew, logically, that this was a terrible investment. Landon had never finished a project in his life. He had quit karate, quit guitar, quit 3 different internships, but then he said, "Dad keeps saying you're the smart one. I want to show him I can be smart too. Help me out." It was a masterclass in manipulation. He played the "we are both trying to please him" card. He aligned us against the father figure, creating a false camaraderie. I sent the money. $6,000? I told myself I wasn't investing in a podcast. I was investing in my brother. I was paying a $6,000 subscription fee to be a sister. The podcast studio launched in January. By March, the Instagram page for the Media Incubator had stopped updating. By April, the website domain had expired. I checked Landon's social media. He was in Cancun for spring break with his friends. When I tried to call him to ask about the business, his number went straight to voicemail. The mailbox was full. I went back to the spreadsheet. Total funds transferred to family $18,450. Return on investment 0. But the real twist, the moment that truly turned my blood into ice water, came later that year. I had to drive through my hometown to get to a forensic accounting conference in Indianapolis. It was a detour, but I felt a masochistic pull to see the streets I grew up on. I stopped at a gas station near the high school to fill up my tank. I was pumping gas when a voice called out, Natalie Mercer." It was Mrs. Higgins, our old neighbor. She was a sweet woman who used to bake lemon squares for the block parties. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, forcing a smile. "It's been so long." She looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. She reached out and patted my arm. "I was so sorry to hear about you and the family. Dear, it's just a shame." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice, leaning in over the gas pump. "Oh, you know, Landon told everyone at the barbecue last month. He said you cut them all off. He said you got some big fancy job in Chicago and decided you were too good for this town. He said you changed your number and refused to speak to them." My hand froze on the gas nozzle. "He said that—" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, dear. Your father was heartbroken. He said, we gave her everything, and she just turned her back on us. I just wanted you to know. I still pray for you." I watched the numbers on the gas pump tick up. $40, $41. The narrative was complete. They weren't just using me for money. They were actively slandering me to cover their tracks. They had to explain why I wasn't around, why I wasn't in the photos. They couldn't say. We only call her when we need cash. That would make them look bad. So they flipped the script. I wasn't the victim. I was the villain. I was the ungrateful, arrogant daughter who abandoned her loving family. And the best part, my donations, the $18,000, the roof, the podcast studio, were the fuel for the very lifestyle they were using to impress the people they were lying to. I drove the rest of the way to Indianapolis in silence. I didn't listen to music. I didn't listen to a podcast. I just listened to the sound of tires on asphalt. That night, in my hotel room, I stopped treating my spreadsheet like a diary. I started treating it like evidence. I bought a physical binder, a thick 3-ring binder with a heavy-duty cover. I went to the business center in the hotel lobby. I printed everything. I printed the text from Veronica asking for the $9,000. I printed the screenshot of the silver SUV. I printed the bank transfer confirmations. I printed the email chain where Landon promised the podcast would blow up. I printed the domain expiration notice for his website. I printed the call logs showing 16 months of silence followed by a demand for cash. I punched holes in every single page. The sound of the hole puncher crunching through the paper was therapeutic. It sounded like bones breaking. I organized the binder chronologically. I used color-coded tabs, red for Veronica, blue for Landon, black for Graham. I labeled the spine of the binder with a label maker, in case I ever think I'm overreacting. And yet, the programming ran deep. December rolled around. The binder was sitting on my bookshelf, a heavy brick of truth. But when the Christmas displays went up in the department stores, I still found myself walking down the aisles. I told myself, blood matters. Maybe this year will be different. Maybe if I just try one more time. I bought a $300 espresso machine for my father. I bought a cashmere scarf for Veronica. I bought a set of wireless noise-canceling headphones for Landon. I wrapped them in gold paper. I wrote thoughtful cards. I shipped them via UPS with tracking. I tracked the package. Status delivered. Signed for by V. Mercer. Christmas Day came. I sat in my apartment with a cup of coffee. My phone was on the table. I waited. 10 in the morning. Nothing. Noon. Nothing. 4 in the afternoon. Nothing. I checked Instagram. There they were. A photo of the 3 of them around the tree. Landon was wearing the headphones I had bought him around his neck. Veronica was wearing the scarf. Caption, another perfect Mercer Christmas. Just the 3 of us. Family is everything. They were wearing my gifts in the photo, and they hadn't even texted to say thank you. They had cropped me out of the existence of the gifts themselves. To the world. They had bought those things. To the world. I did not exist. I looked at the photo, and then I looked at the binder on the shelf. Something clicked. It wasn't a snap. It was a shift. Like a gear finally engaging after grinding for years. I picked up my laptop. I opened the spreadsheet. I didn't add a new entry. I just looked at the totals. I realized then that I had been looking at this wrong. I had been looking at it as a relationship problem. It wasn't a relationship problem. It was a business transaction. A fraudulent one. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't a sister. I was a line item on their balance sheet. Assets Natalie's savings. Availability. Immediate upon guilt tripping. Liabilities none. She requires no maintenance, no love, no acknowledgement. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry this time. You don't cry when you audit a corrupt company. You just prepare the report. And I knew, deep down, that the audit wasn't over. They weren't done with me yet. The $18,000 was just the opening bid. I could feel it. The big ask was coming. I just didn't know it would take 14 months of silence to build up the courage to ask for everything I had. 14 months is 425 days. I know this because I counted every single one of them. I marked them off on the mental calendar I kept in the back of my mind, scratching hash marks into the wall of my psyche like a prisoner serving a sentence for a crime she did not commit. For 14 months, the radio silence from the Mercer family was absolute. It was a vacuum so perfect it was almost impressive. During those 425 days, I made 21 outgoing calls. I sent 7 text messages, mostly on holidays or birthdays, keeping them light and breezy to avoid sounding desperate. I sent 3 care packages, one for my father's 69th birthday, one for Christmas, and one for Veronica when I heard through the grapevine she had caught the flu. I tracked the packages. They were signed for. They were received. But into the void they went, consumed by the black hole of my family's indifference. Eventually, the silence stops hurting and starts calcifying. You build a shell. You stop checking your phone every time it buzzes. You stop hoping that the unknown number on the caller ID is your brother finally realizing he misses his sister. You start to accept the new reality they had chosen to forget me. So, I chose to focus on the one thing that never rejected me, my career. I poured myself into Northbridge Ledger Group. I was the first one in the office at 7 in the morning and the last one to leave at 8 at night. I stopped being just a senior associate and was promoted to lead forensic accountant. My specialty became fraud detection. I was the person they called when a CEO's expenses didn't match the company's revenue, or when a nonprofit's books looked a little too creative. I became an expert at spotting the lie hidden inside the truth. I learned that people tell you who they are not by what they say, but by what they try to hide in the footnotes. And then came that Friday afternoon in late October. It was raining in Chicago. A cold, miserable drizzle that turned the city gray. I was sitting at my desk, buried under a mountain of invoices from a manufacturing client I suspected was inventing vendors to inflate their costs. My eyes were tired. My coffee was cold. I went down to the lobby to check my mail, expecting nothing more than utility bills and maybe a coupon flyer. Instead, I pulled out a heavy cream-colored envelope. The paper was thick, textured cardstock expensive, the kind of paper you use for wedding invitations or summonses from a high-end law firm. My name was handwritten on the front in calligraphy so elegant it looked like a font. Ms. Natalie Mercer. My heart did a traitorous double beat against my ribs. Even after everything, after the roof money, the podcast money, the 14 months of being ghosted, my body still reacted with a jolt of hope. Maybe this is it, the child inside me whispered. Maybe they are reaching out. Maybe they want to fix it. I took the elevator back up to the 23rd floor, the envelope burning a hole in my hand. I sat at my desk and used a letter opener to slice the seal. Inside was a card bordered in gold leaf. You are cordially invited to the 70th birthday celebration of Graham Mercer. Below that, in bold, serif font, a night of legacy, loyalty, and family unity. I read the details. Saturday, November 18th, the Skyline, Meridian Hotel in Atlanta, black tie. It was lavish. It was formal. It was a summons to the High Court of the Mercer family image. But as I held the card, turning it over in my hands, something caught my eye. On the back of the invitation, near the bottom edge, was a small, embossed logo. It was discreet, but distinct, a stylized lighthouse with the words, Mercer Harbor Developments. I frowned. I had never heard of Mercer Harbor Developments. My father had been in commercial insurance for 30 years before retiring to dabble in investments. I knew he liked to project the image of a tycoon, but a development company. That was new, and I had heard nothing about it from him, obviously, or from the few people back home I still spoke to. I felt a prickle of unease at the base of my neck. It was the same sensation I got when looking at a tax return where the deductions were just a little too round, a little too perfect. Nice paper stock, a voice said from the doorway of my cubicle. I looked up. It was Noah Reed. Noah was my counterpart in the forensic department. He was cynical, brilliant, and the only person at Northbridge who knew the full, unvarnished story of my family. He had seen the binder. He had drunk wine with me on the nights I felt like garbage. He was the closest thing I had to a brother, which was ironic, considering I had a biological one who wouldn't return my texts. I handed him the card. My dad's 70th. Apparently, it's a celebration of loyalty, Noah snorted, adjusting his glasses. He leaned against the partition, scanning the invitation. Loyalty. That's rich coming from the people who ghosted you for 400 days. 425, I corrected automatically. Right, 425. Noah flipped the card over. He saw the logo. His eyebrows shot up. Mercer Harbor Developments. Since when is your dad a real estate mogul? I don't know, I said, spinning my pen on the desk. I've never heard of it, but look at the venue, the Skyline Meridian. That is not a cheap party. Noah. That is a $50,000 night, minimum. Noah looked at me. His expression lost its sarcastic edge and became serious. Natalie, listen to me. They ignore you for over a year. You send gifts. They take them and say nothing. You call. They don't answer. And suddenly, out of nowhere, they want you front row at a legacy party. Maybe he just wants his daughter there, I said. It sounded weak even to my own ears. It's his 70th. That's a big milestone. Noah shook his head slowly. He dropped the card back onto my desk. No, that is not a reunion. Nat, that is a pitch. I stared at the gold-bordered card. A pitch. Rich people don't throw parties about legacy when everything is going well. They throw parties about legacy when they need to remind people that they matter. And they definitely don't invite the estranged daughter they've treated like an ATM unless they need something from her. Noah pulled up a chair and sat down next to me. Let's look it up. Look what up? Mercer Harbor Developments. If he's putting the logo on his birthday invite, it's a public entity. Let's see what the paper trail says. I hesitated for a second. Part of me wanted to put the invitation in a drawer and just buy a plane ticket. Part of me wanted to walk into that ballroom blind, hoping for a hug and a slice of cake, but the forensic accountant in me knew Noah was right. I opened my browser. I typed Mercer Harbor Developments into the search bar. The first result was a slick, one-page website. It featured renderings of luxury townhomes overlooking a marina, Harborview Towns, the future of waterfront living. There was a photo of my father in a hard hat, pointing at a construction site, looking visionary. Okay, Noah said, leaning in. Now check the county clerk's office. Check for liens. Check for permits. I navigated to the county's public records portal. I logged in with my professional credentials. I searched the company name. The screen populated with a list of filings. Whoa, Noah whispered. The first thing I saw was a lawsuit filed 3 months ago. JM Concrete versus Mercer Harbor Developments. Non-payment of services. Amount $42,000. I scrolled down. Another lawsuit. Apex Roofing Solutions. Mercer Harbor Developments. Breach of contract. Unpaid invoices. Keep going, Noah said, his voice tight. I checked the mortgage records. There it was. A massive construction loan taken out 18 months ago from Riverside Colonial Bank. The principal was staggering, but what caught my eye was a notice of modification filed just 2 weeks ago. I opened the document. It was a forbearance agreement. The bank had agreed to extend the maturity date of the loan by 30 days. Look at the date, I said, pointing at the screen. The loan is being called on Monday, November 20th. Noah looked at the calendar on the wall. The party is Saturday the 18th, 2 days before the deadline. He needs to show the bank he has capital, I murmured, my brain racing. Or he needs to show potential investors that the project is still viable. That's why the party is so fancy. It's a show of strength. He's trying to prove he's not broke. Check the personal guarantees, Noah suggested. I dug deeper. My father had leveraged everything, the main house, the rental property he owned with Veronica, but there was a gap. Based on the construction delays and the lawsuits, he was underwater. I did a quick calculation based on the square footage and standard construction costs versus the draw schedule from the bank. I pulled up a calculator widget. I punched in the numbers. The shortfall, the amount of liquid cash he would likely need to show the bank to avoid immediate foreclosure or to pay off the most aggressive contractors to keep them quiet, hovered right around $150,000 to $170,000. I stopped breathing. I opened a new tab. I logged into my own bank account. I looked at the total balance of my savings and investment accounts. $163,412. The numbers on the screen blurred. It matches, Noah said softly. It's almost a perfect match. Natalie, tell me you see this. Maybe it's a coincidence, I said. my voice shaking. Maybe he just wants me there. He doesn't know how much money I have. How could he know? He's your dad, Noah said brutally. He knows where you bank because you wired him money for the roof. He knows where you work. People talk. Or maybe he just estimated. Either way, look at the timeline. Silence for 14 months. Then, right when the loan is about to implode, you get a loyalty invitation. I stared at the invitation. The word loyalty suddenly looked less like a promise and more like a threat. This is math, not love, I whispered. It was a mantra I used when I had to tell a nice old lady that her grandson had stolen her pension. This is math. Don't go, Noah said. Seriously, throw that in the trash. Send a card. I looked at the rendering of the Harborview towns. I looked at the lawsuits. I thought about the 14 months of silence. I thought about the moment I sent $400 for Landon's graduation and got nothing back but a check deposited notification. If I didn't go, I would never know for sure. I would always wonder if I was wrong. I would always wonder if, maybe, just this once, he really just wanted to see his daughter blow out the candles with him. But if I did go, I couldn't go as Natalie the daughter. That girl would get eaten alive. I have to go, I said, sitting up straighter. Why? Noah asked, exasperated. To let them gaslight you in person. No, I said. I'm going to find out the truth, and if they try to pull what I think they're going to pull, I need to be in the room. I turned back to my computer. I didn't book a round-trip ticket. I went to Delta Airlines and booked a one-way flight to Atlanta for Saturday morning. Then, I turned to the printer. What are you doing? Noah asked. I'm making a file, I said. I printed the lawsuits from the concrete company. I printed the roofing dispute. I printed the loan forbearance agreement from Riverside Colonial Bank. I printed the timeline of the project delays. I went into my personal email and printed the tracking receipts for the ignored gifts. I printed the call logs showing the hundreds of unreturned calls. I took a fresh manila folder from my drawer. It was crisp and clean. I stacked every single piece of paper inside, organizing them with the precision of a surgeon. I picked up a black marker and wrote on the tab of the folder, "If they try anything." I slipped the folder into my bag. If they just want to cut cake and hug me, I told Noah. This stays in my bag. No one ever sees it. I'll be the best daughter in the world. I'll smile. I'll clap. And if they ask for a check, Noah asked. I looked at him. My eyes were dry. My hands were steady. Then I'm not the daughter anymore, I said. Then I'm the auditor. I looked at the invitation one last time. Legacy, loyalty, unity. Let's see which version of the truth they serve with the appetizers, I said. The Skyline Meridian Hotel was the kind of place that smelled like old money and fresh lilies. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and polished brass, dominated by a chandelier that looked less like a light fixture and more like a frozen explosion of diamonds. It was the sort of venue you booked when you wanted to convince the world that you were too big to fail. I walked through the revolving doors and felt the immediate, physical drop in temperature that comes with high-end air conditioning. I checked my reflection in a gold-framed mirror near the concierge desk. I was wearing a navy blue sheath dress I had picked up at an outlet store 2 seasons ago. It was marked down to $40 because of a missing button I had sewn back on myself. It was clean, it was professional, and it fit well enough. But standing there against the backdrop of velvet ropes and bellhops in pillbox hats, I felt like a staff member who had accidentally wandered through the wrong entrance. I tightened my grip on my purse. Inside, resting against my wallet and my phone, was the manila folder Noah had helped me assemble. It was heavy, a dense brick of paper that held the ugly truth about the people upstairs. I took a deep breath, reminded myself that I was not a scared little girl anymore, and headed for the elevators. The Mercer Legacy Gala was being held in the grand ballroom on the mezzanine level. I didn't need to ask for directions. I just followed the sound of a live jazz band playing a smooth, unrecognizable standard. When the elevator doors slid open, the noise hit me first. It was that specific, low roar of 100 wealthy people making polite conversation while trying to outdrink each other. I stepped out onto the plush carpet and stopped at the edge of the room. Keeping myself in the shadows of a large potted fern, I wanted to survey the terrain before I engaged. It is a habit from the job. You never walk into an audit interview until you have scanned the room for exits and body language. The ballroom was spectacular. Tables were draped in silver silk. Centerpieces of white hydrangeas and orchids towered over the guests, blocking their view of one another. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd like ghosts, balancing trays of champagne and caviar canapes. And there, in the center of it all, was the Mercer solar system. My father, Graham, was holding court near the open bar. He looked every inch the patriarch. His hair, now completely silver, was slicked back in a style that screamed, distinguished statesman. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it had to be bespoke Italian wool, satin lapels, probably costing more than my first car. He was laughing at something a short, bald man was saying, his head thrown back, his hand resting casually on the man's shoulder. It was a laugh I recognized. It was his closing the deal laugh. Next to him stood Veronica. She was impossible to miss. In a sea of safe black ties and muted evening gowns, she was a flare of distress in crimson silk. Her dress was strapless, structured, and aggressive. She was wearing diamonds I had never seen before, a choker that caught the light every time she turned her head. She was smiling. That practiced, frozen smile that engaged only the muscles around her mouth, while her eyes remained scanning the room for threats or better conversation partners. And then there was Landon. My brother was leaning against a high-top table, swirling a glass of scotch he probably didn't like. He was wearing a velvet dinner jacket and a watch that looked heavy enough to anchor a small boat. I squinted. It looked like a Rolex Submariner. 6 months ago, he was asking me for money to start a podcast because he couldn't make rent. Now, he was wearing $10,000 on his wrist. It was a perfect tableau of American success. They looked happy. They looked rich. They looked like a family that had never known a day of struggle. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost turned around and got back on the elevator. I didn't belong here. I was a smudge on their pristine lens. I was the gritty reality they had spent a fortune trying to airbrush out. But then Veronica turned. Her eyes swept over the entrance, likely checking for late arrivals or perhaps a photographer she hadn't posed for yet. Her gaze landed on me. For a microsecond, a fraction of time so small, only a forensic accountant or a neglected child would notice her face fell. It was a flash of pure annoyance, the look you give when a waiter drops a fork during a toast. Then, the mask snapped back into place. Oh my God! Her voice cut through the jazz music, shrill and theatrical. She waved her hand, her bracelets clattering. Natalie, you did come? She started moving toward me, her red dress swishing like a warning flag. Heads turned. The conversation in the immediate vicinity died down. I wouldn't miss it, I said, my voice steady. She reached me and pulled me into a hug. Her body was stiff, hard angles and tension. She smelled of expensive Chardonnay and hairspray. We were so worried the invitation wouldn't find you, she whispered into my ear, her tone dripping with false sweetness. You move around so much. We never know where you are. I had lived in the same apartment for 5 years. They knew exactly where I was. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, her eyes raking over my outlet dress. Look at you. So, practical. You look very sensible, dear. Before I could respond, a booming voice echoed across the floor. There she is. My father was parting the crowd like Moses. He walked toward me with his arms wide open, a beaming smile plastered on his face. He looked at me with an intensity that felt less like love and more like ownership. My firstborn, he announced to the room, grabbing my shoulders. He pulled me into a crushing embrace. My smart girl from Chicago, the city slicker finally comes home. He turned me around to face the guests, keeping a heavy arm draped over my shoulders. I felt like a ventriloquist's dummy. Everyone, this is Natalie, he declared, his voice projecting to the back of the room. Top of her field, Senior forensic accountant at Northbridge Ledger Group. She's the one who keeps the Fortune 500 honest. A ripple of polite applause and murmurs went through the crowd. Impressive, someone said. Good stock, another man grunted. My stomach churned. He was doing it again. He was wearing my resume like a badge of honor, using my hard-earned title to validate his own genetic contribution. He didn't care who I was. He only cared that I sounded expensive. Landon sauntered over, the ice clinking in his glass. He looked me up and down, a smirk playing on his lips. Hey, sis, he drawled. He didn't hug me. He just clapped a hand on my shoulder, right where my father's hand had been. So, Northbridge is treating you well, still making that forensic money. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I was seeing anyone, or if I was happy, or if I had good flight. He asked about the money. I do all right, Landon, I said coldly. Nice watch. Did the podcast finally blow up? He didn't even flinch. Investments. Nat, you got to spend money to make money. You know how it is. I looked around the room properly now, ignoring the family tableau and focusing on the guests. I recognized a few faces from the business pages of the local paper. There was the vice president of the regional bank. There was a zoning commissioner. There were 2 local real estate attorneys. And then I saw the reporters. There were 3 of them, standing near the buffet, holding cameras with massive flash attachments. A woman with a notepad was scribbling furiously as my father spoke. I looked past my father's head to the stage at the far end of the ballroom. A velvet curtain had been pulled back to reveal a massive backdrop. It didn't say, Happy 70th birthday, Graham. It read, Mercer Harbor Developments, a vision for tomorrow. The text was overlaid on a rendering of the luxury townhomes I had seen online, the same project that was drowning in lawsuits and debt. Everything clicked into place. The pieces of the puzzle I had assembled with Noah in Chicago locked together with a terrifying snap. This wasn't a birthday party. This was a launch event. This was an investor roadshow disguised as a family celebration. My father needed to project stability. He needed to show the bank and the potential investors that the Mercer clan was united, successful, and solvent. I wasn't a guest. I was a prop. I was the successful daughter from Chicago, brought in to distract from the fact that the visionary developer was broke and the golden son was unemployed. Graham, darling, Veronica said, touching my father's arm. The presentation starts in 10 minutes. Maybe you and Natalie should have your little chat now. My father checked his watch. The jovial, booming demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by a sharp, hurried focus. Right, he said. He looked down at me. The warmth was gone from his eyes, replaced by a steely determination. Natalie, honey, come with me. There's something important we should discuss. Just family, before the speeches start. Just family, I repeated. The words tasted like ash. Yes, he said, steering me away from the crowd toward a discreet side door near the service entrance. We have a little surprise, an opportunity. We wanted to give you the first look. I felt the weight of my purse on my shoulder. I felt the sharp corner of the manila folder pressing against my hip. I looked at Veronica. She was watching us go, her eyes hard and glittering, like a hawk watching a mouse scurry into a trap. I looked at Landon. He was already back at the bar, ordering another drink, checking his reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. My father opened the heavy wooden door and ushered me through. You know, Natalie, he said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper as we stepped into the hallway. People have been asking about you, wondering why you've been so distant. Tonight is a great chance to show them that we're stronger than ever. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too busy calibrating my internal defenses. I walked beside him, my heels clicking on the parquet floor. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to detach. You are not Natalie Mercer, the daughter who wants her daddy to love her. I thought, you are Natalie Simmons, the auditor who is about to walk into a room and find a discrepancy. He stopped in front of a small conference room at the end of the hall. He put his hand on the doorknob. He looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw a flicker of hesitation. Or maybe it was just calculation. Maybe he was wondering if he had buttered me up enough. "I think you're going to like this," he said. "It's a chance for us to really build something together." He opened the door. The room was small, quiet, and smelled of lemon polish. The noise of the party was instantly cut off, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. There were no balloons here, no flowers, just a long, polished mahogany table with 4 leather chairs, and sitting right in the center of the table, illuminated by a single overhead light, was a thick stack of documents. It was perfectly aligned. It was waiting. It looked less like a business proposal and more like a verdict. My father gestured for me to sit. "After you," he said. I stepped into the room. I heard the door click shut behind us, sealing us in. I didn't sit down. I just stared at the papers on the table, my hand tightening on my bag until my knuckles turned white. The trap was sprung. Now, all I had to do was see exactly how sharp the teeth were. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, severing the connection between the jazz-infused warmth of the ballroom and the sterile, cold silence of the conference room. The air in here was stagnant. It smelled of lemon pledge and desperation. I walked to the table. My legs felt heavy, as if the gravity in the room had suddenly increased. My father, Graham, moved to the head of the table, resting his hands on the back of a leather chair, watching me with an expression that sat uncomfortably between benevolence and anxiety. Veronica leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed, her diamond bracelets clicking softly against each other. Landon slumped into a chair, spinning his phone on the polished mahogany surface. I looked down at the document. The cover page was printed on the same thick, cream-colored stock as the invitation. Family Participation Agreement, Harborview Towns, confidential. I flipped the cover page. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, skipping over the whereas clauses and the definitions of entity and guarantor. My forensic training took over, filtering out the fluff, hunting for the hook. I found it on page 4, section 3.1, capital contribution. There was a blank line for the dollar amount. But it wasn't blank anymore. Someone had filled it in with a pencil, pressing down hard enough to leave an indentation in the paper. $163,000. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air left my lungs. That was not a random number. That was not a round estimate. That was my life. That was the sum total of my savings account, my emergency fund, and the liquid portion of my investment portfolio, rounded down to the nearest thousand. How did they know I looked up at my father? He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were darting around my face, looking for a reaction, looking for compliance. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Graham said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "This project, Natalie, it's not just buildings, it's a legacy. It's something we can leave behind, something that says the Mercer name meant something in this city." He started pacing, using his hands to emphasize his words. "We want you to be a part of it. Not just as a spectator, but as a partner. We want this to be ours, a family enterprise." He kept saying, we want, our legacy, family enterprise. I looked back down at the paper. I read the paragraph under the dollar amount. The contributor acknowledges that this capital injection is classified as an unsecured, subordinated loan to Mercer Harbor Developments, LLC. In the event of insolvency or liquidation, this loan shall be secondary to all senior debt obligations. I translated the legalese in my head. If this project fails, the bank gets paid first, the contractors get paid second, and you get zero. "This isn't an investment," I said. My voice was quiet, but it echoed in the small room. "This is a donation. Don't be cynical," Veronica snapped from the wall. Her voice was sharp, cutting through Graham's soft sell. "It's an opportunity. Your father is offering you a seat at the table. Most children would kill to be involved in a project of this magnitude." "Where did you get this number?" I asked, pointing to the pencil marks. $163,000. That is a very specific number. Dad." Graham stopped pacing. He adjusted his cufflinks. "We did some estimations. Based on your salary, your time at the firm, it's a target figure. A goal. It's my bank balance, I said flatly. You didn't estimate. You found out exactly what I have. Landon let out a short, scoffing laugh. Does it matter? You have it, don't you? I looked at my brother. He looked bored. He looked like a man who had never had to balance a checkbook in his life. Yes, it matters. Landon, I said, because this contract says I have to wire the full amount within 24 hours of signing, and it says I waive my right to audit the books. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was instinct. When I find a smoking gun in an audit, I photograph it immediately before someone can shred it. I held the phone over the document, framing the page with the pencil number and the subordination clause. What are you doing? Veronica pushed off the wall. She moved fast. I'm documenting the offer, I said. We do not photograph private family documents. Natalie, Veronica's voice rose to a screech. She lunged forward and put her hand over the paper, covering the text. Her palm was damp. This is confidential. It stays in this room. If it's a legitimate business deal, why can't I take a picture? I asked, looking her dead in the eye. Because it's family business, she hissed. You always have to make everything so clinical, so cold. You want my money, I said, pulling my phone back but keeping it in my hand. You want every single cent I have ever saved. That is clinical, Veronica. That is extremely cold. I looked at Graham. He looked deflated. The visionary developer mask was slipping, revealing a tired, frightened old man underneath. Why is the date on the wire transfer set for Monday morning? I asked. Why the rush? Graham sighed. He sat down heavily in the chair opposite me. He rubbed his face with his hands. Riverside Colonial Bank, he muttered. What about them? I pressed. They called the loan, he said. The construction delays. The rain last month. We missed 2 milestones. The interest rate adjustment kicked in. They gave us a deadline. We need to show liquidity by close of business Monday, or they initiate foreclosure proceedings. And not just foreclosure, Veronica added, her voice trembling with rage and fear. They'll take the house, our house. They'll take the rental properties. Your father signed personal guarantees on everything. So you need $163,000 to stop the bank from seizing your assets, I said. And since you don't have it, and you can't get it from another bank, you decided to extract it from me. It's a bridge loan, Graham insisted, leaning forward. Just to satisfy the bank examiners, once we get the next draw released, we pay you back. With interest, we'll give you 5% interest. The contract says non-refundable, I pointed out. It says unsecured. That's just boilerplate language, Graham shouted. I'm your father. My word is the contract. Your word? I asked. The same word that promised to call me back 8 years ago. The same word that said you paid for my college when I was working double shifts at the library. Landon slammed his hand on the table. The noise made us all jump. God, you are so dramatic, Landon sneered. He stood up, towering over the table. You make 6 figures, don't you? You live in a little apartment. You don't have kids. You don't have a family to support. This money is nothing to you. It's just numbers on a screen. He pointed a finger at me. To us, this is everything. This is Dad's reputation. This is our home. And you're sitting here nitpicking about audit rights like some corporate robot. I worked for that money. Landon, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. I worked for 10 years. I missed holidays. I missed parties. I ate cereal for dinner while you were partying in Cancun on my dime. Oh, cry me a river, Landon spat. You're selfish. That's what you are. You always have been. Hoarding your money while your family is drowning. Natalie, Veronica said. Her voice had changed. The screech was gone. It was replaced by something lower, darker. She walked around the table until she was standing right next to me. Think about what happens if you don't do this. I keep my savings, I said, and you deal with the consequences of your business decisions. No, Veronica said softly. Think about what people will say. You've been gone so long. Sweetie, people already think you forgot where you came from. They think you're better than them. Imagine what they'll say if they find out you refuse to help your own father on his 70th birthday. Imagine what they'll say when they hear you let us lose the house because you wanted to keep your little pile of gold. It was a threat. Pure and simple. Give us the money, or we destroy your reputation. I looked at the document again. The pencil marks seemed to mock me. I thought about the spreadsheet. I thought about the 425 days of silence. I thought about the binder in my bag. No, I said. The room went silent. What did you say? Graham whispered. No, I repeated, louder this time. I will not sign this. I will not wire the funds. I am not your bailout. Graham's face turned a mottled shade of red. I am your father. I command you to help this family. You are not my father, I said, standing up. You are a man who shares my DNA and sent me an invoice, and I am rejecting it. I turned to leave. Veronica moved faster than I expected. She didn't grab me. She grabbed the door handle, but she didn't block it. She threw it open. The sounds of the party crashed into the room: laughter, the clink of glasses, the jazz band playing a lively, upbeat tune. Veronica stepped out into the hallway, dragging me with her by the elbow. I tried to pull away, but her grip was like iron. We tumbled out of the quiet conference room and into the edge of the ballroom. A few guests near the door turned to look. Veronica didn't lower her voice. She raised it. She pitched it to the back of the room. I can't believe you, she screamed. The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. A hush rippled outward from where we stood, spreading like a wave across the ballroom. After everything he did for you, Veronica shouted, tears suddenly streaming down her face, magic tears, appearing on command. He is losing everything, and you just stand there and laugh. You refuse to help your own father. Graham stepped out of the room behind us. He looked broken. He slumped against the doorframe, playing the part of the crushed patriarch to perfection. Landon followed, shaking his head, looking at the floor as if he was too ashamed to witness my cruelty. I stood there, blinking in the bright lights of the chandeliers. I saw the faces of the guests, the bank vice president, the reporters, the neighbors. They were all staring at me. They didn't see a forensic accountant who had just uncovered a fraud. They saw a cold, heartless daughter in a cheap dress making her stepmother cry. She won't help, Veronica sobbed, turning to the nearest group of guests. She has hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in the bank, and she won't even loan him enough to save the business. She wants us to fail. The whispers started. Is that true? How could she? Ungrateful. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a setup. It was an ambush. They knew I might say no. They had a plan B. If they couldn't get my money, they would take my character. They would burn me at the stake to garner sympathy, maybe to beg for an extension from the investors by blaming the family crisis. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I felt the urge to run, to bolt for the elevator and never look back. But then I felt the weight of my bag, the binder, the evidence. Veronica looked at me. Her eyes wet, but her mouth set in a triumphant sneer that only I could see. She thought she had won. She thought shame was the ultimate weapon. In that moment, looking at their staged tableau of grief and victimhood, I realized the truth. They hadn't invited me to be part of their family. They had invited me to be the villain in their story. And if they wanted a villain, I decided I would give them a show they would never forget. Veronica's voice was still ringing in the rafters of the grand ballroom, a high-pitched frequency designed to shatter glass and reputations alike. Graham's daughter has refused to support him in his hour of need, she projected, turning her tear-streaked face toward the most influential table in the room. After 8 years of never calling, never visiting, never caring if we lived or died, she comes here tonight and laughs at us. The room, which had been buzzing with the low hum of networking and jazz, fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a public execution. I stood near the service doors, the target of 200 pairs of eyes. I could hear the whispers starting, soft at first, then growing like a hive of agitated bees. How could she? A woman in emerald silk murmured, loud enough for me to hear. Kids these days, a man with a cigar grumbled. No sense of duty. Just take the money and run. Poor Graham, another voice chimed in. He talks about her all the time. To be treated like that, I saw a reporter from the Atlanta Business Ledger, a young man with thick-rimmed glasses, flip his notepad open and start writing furiously. Veronica had given him the headline, Prodigal Daughter Returns to Destroy Family Legacy. A woman detached herself from the crowd and marched toward me. It was Great Aunt Linda, my father's older sister. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She looked older, her face set in a mask of disappointment. Natalie, she hissed, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. Have you no shame? Your father gave you everything. He paid for your college. He paid for your apartment. He bragged to us for years about how he supported you while you got on your feet, and this is how you repay him. I looked at her. I looked at the genuine hurt in her eyes, and in that second, the final piece of the puzzle slotted into place. They hadn't just lied to me, they had lied to everyone. For a decade, Graham Mercer had been painting a masterpiece of fiction. In his version of the story, he was the benevolent patriarch, funding my education and my life in Chicago, while I was the distant, ungrateful child who took his money and gave nothing back. If I walked out that door right now, that fiction would become history. I would be the villain forever. My name would be mud in this town, and they would win. But I wasn't just Natalie anymore. I was a senior forensic accountant, and when someone tries to frame you for a crime you didn't commit, you don't run. You present the evidence. I pulled my arm free from Aunt Linda. I didn't say a word to her. I didn't look at Veronica, who was still weeping into a handkerchief near the buffet. I walked straight toward the stage. The jazz band had stopped playing. The drummer watched me approach, his stick suspended in midair. I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. The podium was set up for my father's keynote speech. There was a laptop connected to the massive projector screen behind the stage, currently displaying the Mercer Harbor Developments logo. I stepped up to the microphone. I tapped it once. The sound boomed through the speakers, a sharp thump, thump that made everyone jump. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when testifying in federal court. "I'm sorry to interrupt the party." Graham surged forward from the side of the room. "Natalie, get down from there. Don't make a scene." "You already made the scene, Dad," I said into the mic. "You and Veronica just told this entire room a story. You told them I've been gone for 8 years. You told them I never call. You told them I refused to help you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unplugged the HDMI cable from the laptop on the podium and plugged it directly into my device. "You've heard their version," I said, looking out at the sea of tuxedos and gowns. "I would like to show you mine." I brought receipts. I tapped my screen. The massive Vision for Tomorrow logo behind me vanished. In its place, a high-definition image of a spreadsheet appeared. It was 12 feet tall. The room gasped. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is a record of every single financial transfer I have made to Veronica and Landon Mercer over the last 4 years." I zoomed in. The numbers were crisp and undeniable. Date September 12th, amount $9,000, recipient Veronica Mercer, reason given emergency roof repair for the main house. I swiped to the next image. It was the screenshot of Veronica standing next to the silver SUV. Date November 14th, 2 months later, Veronica posts a photo of a new luxury vehicle. The down payment for this specific model is exactly $9,000. The roof, as many of you who visited the house might have noticed, was never repaired. A murmur went through the crowd, but this time, the tone was different. It wasn't judgment. It was confusion. Date January 3rd, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Amount $6,000. Recipient Landon Mercer. Reason given seed capital for a media business. I swiped again. The expired domain notice and Landon's spring break photos from Cancun appeared. The business never launched. The money was spent at an all-inclusive resort in Mexico. I looked down at Landon. He was pale, his mouth slightly open, the arrogance completely drained from his face. In total, I said, I have transferred over $20,000 to this family in the last 4 years. My father told you he paid for my college. The truth is, I attended on a full academic scholarship and worked 2 jobs. He hasn't spent a dime on me since I was 18, but I have certainly spent a fortune on them. She's lying, Veronica shrieked from the floor. Those are fake. She's good with computers. Let's talk about the silence, I said, cutting her off. Veronica told you I haven't called in 8 years. She told you I abandoned them. I swiped to the next slide. It was a visualization of my call logs from the telecom provider, a long vertical timeline. On the left were blue bars representing outgoing calls. On the right were gray bars representing unanswered voicemails. The left side was a solid wall of blue. The right side was empty. These are official records from Verizon, I narrated, acting as the expert witness in my own defense. 312 outgoing calls from my number to theirs, 7 responses, 0 return calls. I called for birthdays. I called for anniversaries. I called when I got promoted. For 8 years, I spoke to their voicemail. The silence in the room was now absolute. The reporter from the business ledger was standing up, his phone raised, recording the screen. But why? I asked the room. Why invite me back now? Why, after 14 months of total silence, did I get a gold-embossed invitation to a party celebrating loyalty? I swiped to the next image. This was the kill shot. The screen filled with the court documents I had pulled with Noah. The headers were clearly visible. Superior Court of Fulton County. This is a lawsuit filed by JM Concrete against Mercer Harbor Developments for $42,000 in unpaid labor. I said. I swiped. This is a foreclosure warning from Riverside Colonial Bank. The construction loan for the project you are celebrating tonight is in default. The bank has called the loan. They require a cash injection by Monday morning, or the property will be seized. I saw the bank vice president, the man my father had been laughing with earlier, turn around and stare at Graham. Graham was frozen, his face a mask of horror. And that brings us to the legacy, I said. I swiped to the final image. It was the photo I had taken 10 minutes ago in the conference room, the family participation agreement. I zoomed in on the pencil-written number $163,000. This is the contract they tried to make me sign in the back room, I said. They didn't want to catch up. They didn't want a reunion. They had investigated my finances, determined exactly how much money I have in my life savings, $163,000, and drafted a contract to take 100% of it. I pointed to the clause at the bottom of the projected document. It is a non-refundable, unsecured contribution, I read aloud, meaning when the bank takes the property on Monday, my money vanishes with it. I looked directly at the camera lens of the reporter. Then I looked at my father. They didn't invite me to celebrate family, I said, my voice ringing with finality. They invited me to underwrite their bad decisions. I unplugged my phone. The screen went black. For 3 seconds, there was no sound. No one moved. No one breathed. The weight of the evidence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Then, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor broke the spell. It was the man from the investment group, the one Graham had been courting all night. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and looked at my father. "Graham," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "I think we're done here." He turned and walked toward the exit. That was the dam breaking. The bank vice president pulled out his phone and started dialing as he walked away, presumably calling his risk management department. The zoning commissioner shook his head and signaled to his wife. The guests didn't storm out. They just dissolved. They were wealthy, polite people who abhorred a scandal. They set their champagne glasses down on passing trays and drifted toward the elevators, avoiding eye contact with the Mercers as if failure was a contagious disease. "No!" Veronica screamed. She ran into the center of the floor, grabbing at the arm of a fleeing guest. "Wait! She's twisting everything. It's not what it looks like. The project is fine." The guest pulled his arm away gently but firmly. "Good night, Veronica." Graham stood alone near the stage. He looked small. The tuxedo that had looked so dashing an hour ago now looked like a costume. He looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. There was no anger left, just the terrifying realization that the curtain had been pulled back and there was no wizard, just a man with a lot of debt. I stepped down from the stage. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to hear their excuses. The audit was complete. The findings were conclusive. I walked past Aunt Linda, whose mouth was hanging open. I walked past the reporter, who gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of respect. I walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby with the diamond chandelier, and into the cool night air of Atlanta. I had come looking for a family. I left with something better. I left with the truth. I walked out of the Skyline Meridian and into the humid Atlanta night. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash that follows a nuclear detonation. I hailed a cab, gave the driver the address of the airport, and sank into the cracked leather seat. I did not turn on my phone for the first 20 minutes of the ride. I just stared out the window at the blurred streetlights, wondering if I had gone too far, wondering if I was the monster they said I was. When I finally pressed the power button, the device nearly vibrated out of my hand. I had expected angry texts from my father. I had expected voicemails from Veronica. What I did not expect was to see my face looping on a screen that wasn't mine. I opened TikTok. It was the first thing on my For You page. Someone in the crowd, probably a waiter or a board +1, had recorded the entire presentation. The video was titled, "You are at a gala and the daughter brings receipts." It had 1.2 million views. It had been posted 45 minutes ago. I watched myself on the tiny screen. I looked taller than I felt. My voice sounded steady, almost robotic. As I listed the dates and the dollar amounts, I watched the moment the projection screen switched to the foreclosure notice. I watched the collective gasp of the room ripple through the comment section. Top comment: the way she pulled out the foreclosure notice like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. I am screaming. Second comment: wait, they asked for her life savings at a birthday party. That is diabolical. Third comment: I am an accountant, and this is the most romantic thing I have ever seen. I closed the app. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt exposed. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be invisible, trying to be the quiet professional who fixes other people's messes. In less than an hour, I had become a main character on the internet. By the time I landed back in Chicago the next morning, the story had jumped from social media to traditional news. I bought a coffee in the terminal and pulled up the digital edition of the Atlanta Business Ledger. The reporter I had seen taking notes, a man named David Choi, had not wasted any time. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. Mercer Harbor Developments faces insolvency amidst family dispute. The article was a forensic dismantling of my father's business facade. It detailed the $42,000 owed to the concrete company. It cited the public records regarding the loan default. But then, it pivoted to the human interest angle. It read, "During the event, which was billed as a celebration of family loyalty, documents were presented alleging that Mr. Mercer attempted to solicit over $160,000 from his estranged daughter to satisfy bank requirements. Legal experts questioned the ethics of soliciting unsecured capital from family members without disclosing the senior debt status of the entity. They didn't name me. They referred to me as the source or Ms. Mercer. But everyone who mattered knew exactly who I was. I went straight from the airport to the Northbridge Ledger Group office. I was wearing the same clothes I had traveled in. I felt gritty and exhausted. I expected to find a cardboard box waiting on my desk. I expected security to escort me out. Corporate firms hate drama, and I was currently trending on Twitter. I swiped my badge. The light turned green. I walked to my desk. Noah Reed was there, staring at his monitor. He looked up, saw me, and stood up slowly. He didn't say a word. He just started a slow clap. "Stop it," I whispered, dropping my bag. "You are a legend," Noah said, grinning. "The forensic department group chat is on fire. The way you cross-referenced the SUV purchase with the roof repair claim art, Pure art. I'm going to get fired, I said, sinking into my chair. Partners hate publicity. Natalie. I looked up. It was Marcus Vance, the managing partner of the firm. He was standing in the doorway of his glass office. He waved me over. I walked to his office like I was walking to the gallows. I sat down. I saw the video, Marcus said. He was a man of few words, usually reserved for discussing tax liabilities. I can explain, I started. It was a personal matter that escalated. I didn't intend to drag the firm into it. Did you forge any of the documents shown? Marcus asked. No. Did you access any databases illegally? No. Everything was public record or my own personal financial data. Marcus nodded. He leaned back in his chair. We are forensic accountants. Natalie, our job is to find the truth and present it. Regardless of how uncomfortable it makes people, you identified a fraud attempt, you gathered evidence, and you presented your findings to the stakeholders. I would say you adhered to the highest standards of the profession. I blinked. So, I'm not fired. We have had 3 new client inquiries this morning specifically asking for the woman from the video, Marcus said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. However, your name is out there. If you need legal support, the firm's counsel is available to you. We protect our own. I walked back to my desk feeling a strange sensation in my chest. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was safety. My employer, a corporate entity concerned with profit, was treating me with more loyalty than the people who shared my blood. But the relief was short-lived. 2 days later, the retaliation arrived via certified mail. It was a letter from a law firm in Atlanta I had never heard of. It was addressed to Natalie Mercer. RE defamation of character, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I opened it. It was a cease and desist order, combined with a threat of a civil suit. My father was demanding that I remove all illegally obtained images from the internet as if I controlled TikTok. He was demanding a public apology. He was demanding damages in the amount of $500,000 for reputational harm that had allegedly caused investors to pull out of the Harborview project. He was blaming me. He wasn't blaming the market, or his bad loans, or his lies. He was blaming the whistleblower. I didn't call him. I called Amelia Rhodes. Amelia was a lawyer Noah had recommended. She specialized in civil litigation and, crucially, identity law. Her office was in a brownstone in the Gold Coast, quiet and filled with books. She read the letter in silence, her expression unreadable. He doesn't have a case, Amelia said, tossing the letter onto her desk like it was a piece of junk mail. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. You presented bank statements and public court records. He can't sue you for showing people his own math. He can try, I said. He loves courtrooms. He thinks he can bully me into silence. He can harass you, Amelia corrected. He can file frivolous motions. He can depose you. He can drag this out for 2 years and force you to spend $50,000 on legal fees just to get it dismissed. That is the strategy here. It's called a war of attrition. She looked at me over her glasses. You have 2 choices. Natalie, you can fight him. We can file a countersuit for fraud. We can drag him through discovery. We can make sure the entire state of Georgia knows exactly where every penny went. It will be satisfying, but it will be loud, and it will be your life for the next 18 months. Or, I asked. Or, Amelia said, leaning forward, you can disappear. I stared at her. Disappear. You said you wanted to be done, Amelia said. This letter. This is a tether. He is trying to keep you engaged. He is trying to force a relationship, even if that relationship is adversarial. As long as you are Natalie Mercer, his daughter, he feels entitled to your attention, even if it is through a lawyer. She opened a folder on her desk. In the state of Illinois, you can petition for a legal name change. It is a straightforward process. Once it is done, we seal the record, we update your social security, your passport, your bank accounts. You become a ghost to him. Is that legal? I asked. Running away. You are not running from debt, Amelia said firmly. You are not running from a crime. You are running from people who treat you like both. You are an adult woman who is choosing to sever a toxic connection. It is not just legal. Sometimes, it is necessary for survival. She slid a form across the desk. Petition for change of name. If we do this, Amelia said, we do it completely. We don't just change the name. We change the contact points. New phone, new email. We set up a trust to hold your property so your name doesn't appear on public deeds. If he hires a private investigator, and he will, they will hit a wall. I looked at the form. It felt heavy. I need to think about it, I said. But my father didn't give me much time to think. The harassment started 48 hours later. It wasn't texts or calls anymore. It was a campaign. I received an email from the HR director at Northbridge. Someone had called the main switchboard claiming to be a concerned creditor, alleging that I had embezzled money from a previous employer. It was a lie, easily disproven, but it was embarrassing. Then, my landlord called. A man claiming to be a detective had been asking questions about my comings and goings, asking if I had overnight guests, asking if I paid my rent in cash. Graham was paying a private investigator. He was spending money he didn't have to hunt me down, not to apologize, but to find leverage. He wanted dirt. He wanted anything he could use to discredit me, to make the crazy daughter narrative stick. I called Jessica, my friend from high school. Nat, she sounded panicked. Veronica called my mom. She told her that you're having a mental breakdown. She said you're off your meds and imagining things. She asked if I knew where you were living because they want to send a wellness check. A wellness check. That was the code for sending the police to my door to humiliate me. They were not going to stop, as long as I was within their reach, as long as I was a character in their story. They would keep rewriting my lines. I went home that night. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my floor. Around me were the stacks of paper, the binder. In case I ever think I'm overreacting, the printouts of the lawsuits, the cease and desist letter. It was a museum of pain, and I was the curator. I realized that fighting them was still a form of intimacy. Suing them back was still a relationship. I didn't want to win. I just wanted to be free. I picked up the form Amelia had given me. State of Illinois, Circuit Court of Cook County, petition for change of name. I filled in my current name, Natalie Jean Mercer. I looked at it. It looked like a shackle. Then I looked at the line below it, proposed new name. My pen hovered. I thought about my mother, not Veronica, but my real mother. Her name was Sarah Simmons. She was the only person in that house who had ever looked at me and seen a person, not an asset. She had died before the money became the god of the Mercer household. Simmons. It was a common name. It was anonymous. It was safe, but more than that, it was mine. It was a connection to the only love that hadn't come with an invoice attached. I wrote it down. Simmons. Then I looked at the first name. Natalie. I hesitated. Should I change that too? Should I become Jennifer or Kate or Alexandra? No. Natalie was the one who survived. Natalie was the one who got the scholarship. Natalie was the one who built a career at Northbridge. I liked Natalie. I didn't want to kill her. I just wanted to liberate her. I wrote it down. Natalie Simmons. I didn't sign the form yet. I left it on the coffee table, next to the wine glass. It sat there like a loaded gun. A lot of you have asked in the comments of the viral video if I felt guilty. You asked if I felt bad for humiliating an old man on his birthday. You asked if I felt bad for potentially ruining his business. I did, for a long time. Guilt was the primary engine of my life. It was the fuel that kept me sending checks. It was the voice that said, "But he's your dad." But that night, staring at the cease and desist letter next to the name change petition, the guilt evaporated. You cannot feel guilty for surviving a predator, even if that predator used to read you bedtime stories. I picked up the form. I put it in a fresh envelope. I was ready to fire the weapon, but I knew that once I mailed this, there was no going back. The bridge wouldn't just be burned, it would be wiped from the map. I was ready to nuke the coordinates. The months that followed the explosion at the Skyline Meridian were not loud. They were quiet. It was a strange, unsettling silence, different from the one I had endured for 8 years. That previous silence had been a weapon used against me, a void designed to make me feel small. This new silence was one I had created. It was a boundary. I continued going to work at Northbridge Ledger Group every day. The stares from my colleagues eventually faded, replaced by a sort of quiet respect. I was no longer just the quiet girl in forensic accounting. I was the woman who had brought down a house of cards with a projector and a spreadsheet, but while my professional life stabilized, my personal life required a demolition crew. I moved out of my apartment. It was a perfectly fine apartment, but it was filled with ghosts. It was the place where I had waited for phone calls. It was the place where I had cried over Christmas cards that never arrived. It was the place where I had built the binder. I found a smaller unit in a brownstone in Lincoln Park. It had hardwood floors that creaked and a view of an alleyway, but it felt clean. I sold my car, a sensible sedan I had driven since college because it was the car I drove home in the last time I visited them. Every time I gripped the steering wheel, I remembered the drive back to Chicago, wiping tears from my eyes on the interstate. I didn't want that memory anymore. I sold it to a teenager on Craigslist for $4,000 and bought a monthly pass for the L train. I was scrubbing the floors of my mind, trying to bleach out the stains of the Mercer legacy. "You are trying to control the environment because you couldn't control the people," Dr. Parker said. Dr. Parker was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a gaze that felt like it could see through drywall. I had started seeing her 3 weeks after the party. I told her everything. I told her about the roof money. I told her about the podcast studio. I told her about the years of voicemails. She didn't call it family drama. She didn't tell me to forgive and forget. "This is financial and emotional exploitation. Natalie," she said during our 4th session, "you were not a daughter to them. You were a resource, like a coal mine. They mined you until they thought the vein had run dry, and when they realized there was more, they came back with heavy machinery." Hearing a professional say the words out loud, exploitation was like having a heavy coat taken off my shoulders. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a victim of a long con that had started the day I got my first paycheck. But just as I was beginning to find a rhythm in this new, quiet life, the past came knocking, not with a text message, but with a process server. He caught me outside my office building on a Tuesday morning. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker who handed me a thick envelope and said, "You have been served." I didn't open it on the sidewalk. I took it upstairs to my desk, my hands shaking just slightly. It was a civil lawsuit. Graham Mercer versus Natalie Mercer. The allegations were breathtaking in their audacity. My father was suing me for defamation, tortious interference with business relations, and breach of privacy. He claimed that my public stunt at the gala had directly caused the collapse of the Harborview town's financing, resulting in damages of $3 million. He claimed I had unlawfully disclosed trade secrets, by which he meant the fact that he was broke. I called Amelia Rhodes immediately. "He is desperate," Amelia said, flipping through the scanned pages I had sent her. We were sitting in her office again, the same room where she had first suggested I disappear. "This is a SLAPP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. He is trying to scare you into a settlement because he needs cash, and he thinks you will pay him to go away." "Will it work?" I asked. "Can he actually win?" "No," Amelia said, taking off her glasses. "His case is built on sand. You shared public records and your own bank statements. Truth is the ultimate defense. But, Natalie, he can make this messy. He can drag you into depositions. He can make you sit across a table from him and answer questions about your childhood. He wants to force a confrontation." I looked at the window, watching the Chicago traffic crawl by. "He wants access," I said. "He knows I blocked his number. He knows I moved. The courtroom is the only place he can force me to look at him." "Exactly," Amelia said. "We can file a motion to dismiss, but the judge might order a preliminary hearing first. It is scheduled for late October." "I'll go," I said. Amelia looked surprised. "You don't have to. I can represent you." No, I said. If I hide, he thinks he has power. I need to finish this. I need to kill this thing properly. We go to court. We bring the binder. We bring the receipts. We put it all on the public record, under oath, so he can never lie about it again. Amelia nodded slowly. All right, if we are doing this, we are doing it my way. Scorched earth. Good, I said. And Amelia? The name change. I want to expedite it. Are you sure? I am sure. I took the pen she offered. The form was still the same one I had hesitated over months ago, but this time, the hesitation was gone. Proposed new name Natalie Simmons. Simmons was my mother's maiden name. It was also her mother's name, my grandmother, a woman who smelled like lavender and dust, who used to braid my hair and tell me I was smart without adding for a girl. She was the only person in my family tree who had ever held me without looking over my shoulder to see if there was someone more important in the room. She died when I was 10, but I remembered her hug. It didn't feel like a transaction. I signed the petition. Amelia stamped it. I will file this tomorrow, she said. The court system is backed up, but we should get a hearing date around the same time as the lawsuit. I left her office feeling lighter, but the universe has a way of testing your resolve just when you think you are safe. 2 days later, the receptionist at Northbridge messaged me, "There is a letter for you at the front desk. No return address. It says personal." My stomach tightened. I walked to the lobby. The envelope was plain white, cheap. The handwriting was messy. A scrawl of blue ink that tilted to the left. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards I bought for him to sign for Mom. I had seen it on the business plan for the podcast studio. It was from Landon. I didn't open it in the lobby. I took it to the break room, found a corner table, and sat down. My thumb hovered over the flap. Part of me wanted to shred it. Part of me wanted to burn it. But the curiosity, the old, pathetic desire to know why won out. I tore it open. It was written on lined notebook paper, the kind you buy at a drugstore. Nat, I don't know if you will read this. Dad says you are dead to us. Mom says you are mentally unstable. But I saw the video again yesterday. I watched it like 10 times. I am writing this from the break room at an Amazon warehouse in Chambly. I work the night shift now, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. My back hurts so bad I can barely stand up straight. I am living in a studio apartment that smells like soup. I pay for it myself. Dad lost the house. The bank took it last week. They are staying with Aunt Linda. It is a mess. I just wanted to say, you were right. About the money. About the silence. I was a jerk. I thought the money just came from a magic tap. I didn't know you were working like this. Or maybe I did know. And I just didn't care because it was easier to let you pay for my mistakes. I am not asking for anything. Seriously, do not send money. I am making $18 an hour and I'm learning how to budget. It sucks. But for the first time, I sleep at night because nobody owns me. I hope you are okay. I hope you are happy. I'm sorry I treated you like an ATM. You were the only real thing in our house, and we missed it. Landon. I put the letter down on the table. My coffee had gone cold. I read it again, and again. I looked for the angle. I looked for the request. I need money for rent. I need money for a car. But it wasn't there. He was working a warehouse job. Landon. The golden boy who used to complain if his steak wasn't cooked medium rare, was lifting boxes for $18 an hour. A complicated knot of emotions formed in my throat. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't happy, either. I felt a profound sense of grief. He finally got it. He finally understood the value of labor, the weight of a dollar, but it had taken the complete destruction of our family to teach him. I went back to my desk and pulled out a notepad. I wrote Landon, "Thank you for the letter. I am glad you are finding your own way." I looked at it. It felt too cold. I tore the page off and crumpled it. I wrote again. "Dear Landon, I am proud of you. Keep going. Maybe one day we can get coffee." I stared at the word coffee. Coffee meant a meeting. A meeting meant opening the door. If I opened the door for Landon, would Graham try to squeeze through it? Would Veronica? I tore that page off too. I wrote 3 more drafts. One was angry, One was nostalgic. One was just a list of financial advice for someone living on $18 an hour. In the end, I didn't send any of them. I folded Landon's letter and put it in my purse, next to my wallet. I wasn't ready to reply. Not yet. His apology was a start. But trust is a structure that takes years to build. And they had dynamited the foundation. I couldn't just rebuild it because he sent one nice note. But the letter stayed in my bag. It was the first thing from my family in 8 years that I didn't want to burn. September turned into October. The leaves in Chicago turned gold and brown, rattling against the pavement. Then, the notifications arrived. Amelia called me on a Thursday afternoon. "We have dates," she said. Her voice was brisk, professional. "For the lawsuit." "For everything," she said. "The Cook County clerk has scheduled your name change hearing for Tuesday, October 24th, 9 a. "Okay," I said. "And the lawsuit?" "The preliminary hearing for Mercer versus Mercer is set for Thursday, October 26th, in Atlanta. You will have to fly down." I looked at my calendar. They were in the same week, 48 hours apart. The universe had a sense of humor, a dark, twisted sense of humor. "So," I said, tracing the dates on my desk calendar with my finger. "On Tuesday, I go to court in Chicago to kill Natalie Mercer, and on Thursday, I go to court in Atlanta to be sued as her." "Technically," Amelia said, "once the judge signs the order on Tuesday, Natalie Mercer ceases to exist legally. We will file a motion to update the defendant's name in the Atlanta case, but for all intents and purposes, Graham will be suing a ghost." "He's going to hate that," I said. A small, cold smile touched my lips. "He's going to hate that I am not the person he put on the court documents anymore." "That is the point," Amelia said. "Are you ready for this? It is going to be an emotional week." "I have been ready for 8 years," I said. That night, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my new bedroom. I looked at myself. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. I thought about the girl who had waited by the phone. I thought about the girl who had sewn a button onto a $40 dress so she could look presentable for a father who only saw her as a bank account. I thought about the woman who had stood on that stage and burned it all down. I touched the glass of the mirror. "Goodbye, Natalie Mercer," I whispered. I was going to bury her. I was going to give her a proper funeral in a courtroom in Chicago, and then I was going to fly to Atlanta and stare down the man who created her. In one courthouse, I was going to bury the name he gave me. In another, he was going to try to use that name one last time to control me. But he was going to find out that you cannot sue a woman who no longer exists. Tuesday morning in Chicago was gray and blustery, the kind of weather that usually makes people pull their coats tighter and keep their heads down. But as I walked up the steps of the Circuit Court of Cook County, I felt like the sun was shining directly on my face. I was holding a thin manila folder against my chest. Inside was the petition I had stared at for months. The hearing was anticlimactic in the best possible way. There was no gallery full of spectators. There were no reporters. There was just me, Amelia Rhodes, and a judge who looked like he had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. I stood before the bench. The judge peered at me over his reading glasses. He reviewed the file. He asked the standard questions. Was I changing my name to evade debt? Was I changing my name to hide from criminal charges? No. Was I changing my name to commit fraud? No, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady in the quiet courtroom. I am changing my name to sever ties with a family history that no longer serves me. The judge nodded. He didn't ask for details. He didn't ask for the sob story. He just picked up his stamp. He signed the order. He brought his gavel down with a sharp wooden crack that sounded like a pistol shot starting a race. "Petition granted," he said. "Your new legal name is Natalie Simmons." I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding for 8 years. It wasn't a dramatic exhale. It was a release. I felt a physical sensation, like a heavy, invisible rope that had been tied around my neck since birth had suddenly been severed. I walked out of that courtroom as a different person. I had a new Social Security card on the way. I had a new identity. But I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone. I kept that secret locked tight in my chest, a hidden blade I was saving for one final battle, because the war wasn't quite over. 48 hours later, I was walking into another courthouse. This one was in Atlanta. The air here was thick and humid, heavy with the scent of impending rain. On the docket, the case was listed as Graham Mercer versus Natalie Mercer. The system hadn't updated yet. To the state of Georgia, I was still the daughter. To my father, I was still a possession that had malfunctioned. I walked into the courtroom with Amelia by my side. My father was already there. He was sitting at the plaintiff's table, flanked by a lawyer who wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. Veronica was sitting in the front row of the gallery, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the back of Graham's head as if she could telepathically control his movements. And then I saw him, sitting in the back row, far away from Veronica, was Landon. He looked different. The expensive haircut was gone, replaced by something simple and a little uneven. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a clean flannel shirt and jeans. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of night shifts and fluorescent warehouse lights. He looked up when I entered. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just gave me a small, solemn nod. It was an acknowledgement. He wasn't here to support them. He was here to witness the end. I sat down. I didn't look at Graham. I opened my laptop. The proceedings began. Graham's lawyer stood up and launched into an opening statement that was a work of fiction so elaborate it belonged on a bestseller list. He painted a picture of a devoted father whose reputation had been savagely destroyed by a vindictive, estranged daughter. He claimed that my presentation at the gala was a calculated lie designed to ruin Graham's business deals. He claimed that the $163,000 was a misunderstood investment opportunity that I had twisted out of context. "Ms. Mercer," the lawyer thundered, pointing a finger at me, "acted with actual malice. She sought to humiliate her father. She sought to bankrupt him." I sat there, calm. I was Natalie Simmons now. Natalie Mercer might have been intimidated by her father's anger, but Natalie Simmons was just watching a man dig his own grave. When it was our turn, Amelia didn't give a speech. She just stood up and said, "Your Honor, the defense disputes the characterization of the events. We argue that truth is an absolute defense against defamation. We are prepared to show that every single statement made by the defendant was factual and supported by documentary evidence." I connected my laptop to the court's display system. For the second time in 2 months, I projected the receipts, but this time, it wasn't for a room full of socialites. It was for a judge who had zero patience for theatrics. I walked the court through the evidence. Exhibit A. The bank transfer for the roof repair. Side by side with the dealership invoice for Veronica's SUV. Exhibit B. The Verizon call log showing 300 outgoing calls and 0 incoming. Exhibit C. The foreclosure notice from Riverside Colonial Bank, dated prior to the party. Exhibit D. The family participation agreement, with the subordination clause highlighted, and then I added a new slide. Exhibit E. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is an invoice from a private investigation firm in Chicago. My father paid $3,000 to have a man follow me, harass my landlord, and call my employer with false accusations of embezzlement." The judge frowned. He looked at Graham. Graham shrank in his seat. Amelia took the floor for the cross-examination. She didn't scream. She didn't pace. She just looked at Graham, who was now on the witness stand, looking pale and sweaty. "Mr. Mercer," Amelia said, "look at the screen. Can you point to a single document that is forged?" "Well, no," Graham stammered. "But the context—" "Can you point to a single financial figure that is incorrect?" Amelia pressed. "She made it look bad," Graham argued. "She embarrassed me." "That is not the question," Amelia said. "Is the information true? Did you ask her for $163,000? "Yes," Graham whispered. "Did you tell the guests she never called you, despite these phone records proving otherwise?" Graham looked at the judge. He looked at Veronica. He looked at Landon, who was staring at the floor. I might have misremembered, Graham said. So, Amelia concluded, turning to the judge, the defendant told the truth. The plaintiff lied. And now, the plaintiff is using this court to harass the defendant further because he is angry that his lies were exposed. The judge didn't even call a recess. He looked at Graham over his spectacles with an expression of profound distaste. Mr. Mercer, the judge said, the court system is a mechanism for justice, not a tool for family retaliation. You have failed to provide a shred of evidence that the defendant defamed you. In fact, you have confirmed under oath that her statements were accurate. The gavel came down. Case dismissed with prejudice, the judge ruled. Furthermore, I am finding the plaintiff's conduct to be frivolous and vexatious. Mr. Mercer, you are ordered to pay all of the defendant's legal fees, and let me be clear, if you contact Ms. Mercer again, for any reason, I will grant a permanent restraining order so fast your head will spin. It was over. I packed up my laptop. I put the binder back in my bag. I felt clean. I walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. Amelia stayed behind to file the paperwork for the fees. I wanted to get to the exit. I wanted to get to the airport. Natalie. I stopped. I turned around. Graham was hurrying down the hallway after me. Veronica was nowhere to be seen. She had likely stormed off the moment the verdict was read. But Graham was still trying. He looked desperate. He looked old. Natalie, wait, he said, catching his breath. He reached out as if to touch my arm, but stopped when he saw the look in my eyes. We can fix this, he said. His voice was pleading. I know things got messy. I know I made mistakes. But you won. Okay. You proved your point. But we are still family. You are still my daughter. We can start over. He was doing it again. He was trying to negotiate. He thought this was just a leverage game. He thought that now that he had lost, he could just offer a settlement and everything would go back to normal. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ignored me for 8 years. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my future to pay for his mistakes. No, I said. What? He blinked. Natalie, please, I'm your dad. I straightened my spine. I looked him dead in the eye. The court just called me Ms. Simmons, I said. He froze. What? I changed my name, I said. Legally, officially, 2 days ago. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Natalie Mercer is gone, I said. You sued a ghost. You lost the right to call me anything years ago. But now you literally don't have the words. I turned to walk away. Wait, this time, the voice came from behind Graham. It was Landon. My brother walked past our father without even looking at him. He stopped in front of me. He looked awkward, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. It was the letter, or maybe a new one. He held it out. I just wanted to make sure you got this, he said. I looked at the envelope. I looked at his face. There was no arrogance there, just regret. I read it. Landon, I said. I'm glad you're working. I'm glad you're standing on your own feet. I am sorry, he said. For everything. I really am. I know, I said, and I meant it. Can we... He hesitated. I know Dad is... Dad. But can we ever talk just us? I looked at him. I felt a tug in my chest. He was my brother. We shared memories of a time before Veronica, before the money ruined everything. But then I remembered the silence. I remembered the years I spent begging for scraps. I remembered that I had just spent months building a wall to protect myself. I couldn't tear it down just because he tapped on it. I hope you become different from them, Landon, I said gently. I really do, but you are going to have to do it without me watching. He looked crushed, but he nodded. He understood. Consequences are not a punishment. They are just the result of actions. Good luck, Natalie, he whispered. Good luck, Landon. I turned around. I walked down the long marble hallway. I walked past my father, who was standing still as a statue, staring at nothing. I walked out the double doors and into the sunlight. I didn't look back. 6 months later. The camera clicks on. I am sitting in a sun-drenched living room, outside the window. The Space Needle cuts through the misty Seattle skyline. It is raining, but it is a cozy rain, the kind that makes the coffee taste better. I am wearing a sweater I knit myself. My hair is different, shorter, lighter. I look like someone you might pass on the street and not notice. That is the point. I look directly into the lens. Sss, I say, taking a sip from a mug that says, "Audit this." That is the story. That is how I went from being an invisible daughter to a viral villain to a woman with no past. I lean forward. I sold the house in Chicago. I sold the furniture. I changed my number. I changed my email. I moved 2,000 miles away to a city where nobody knows who Graham Mercer is. I have new friends here. They know me as Natalie Simmons. They think I'm an orphan. And in a way, I am. I pause. My family purposely forgot me for 8 years. They erased me because it was convenient. Changing my name was just me returning the favor. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of alignment. I just made the paperwork match the reality. I take a deep breath. A lot of you have been following this story since the TikTok video dropped. A lot of you have sent me messages saying that you are the ATM of your family, or the invisible child, or the scapegoat. You ask me when it is okay to walk away. I look straight at you, the viewer. You have the right to leave. You do not owe your life to the people who gave it to you, especially if they try to charge you for it. You don't need a court order. You don't need a permission slip. You just need to decide that you are worth more than a line item on someone else's balance sheet. I smile. It is a real smile. If my story sounded anything like your life, you are not alone, but you can be free. Thank you so much for listening to my journey. I really want to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening to this on your way to work? Or maybe while you're cleaning up your own apartment? Drop a comment below and let's share our stories. If you want to hear more from people who walked away and never looked back, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach someone who might really need to hear it today. I'm Natalie Simmons now, and that is the only name I answer to.